Good evening, everyone. Good evening to my professor. I am Angeline Viriluao, and I will be presenting the decentralization and local governance. One of the book that I have used for this discussion will be the New Horizon of Public Administration, and then the other will be the Public Administration in Globalizing World. Next slide, please. So one of the goals or objectives of this discussion is for us to be able to know what are the concept of decentralization. Next will be what are the significance of this decentralizations, especially when it comes to local governance. Lastly, are what are the different approaches to decentralization. Next slide, please. So let us first define what is decentralization. So when we say decentralization, it is specifically a transfer of authority and responsibility for public functions from the central government to subordinate or quasi-independent government organizations and or private sectors. So to dig deeper, the decentralization is a concept which can be defined as a transfer or dispersal of decision making powers. It also accompanied by delegation of authority to individuals or units at all levels of an organization. So even if in any or located far or any are located far away from the power center, which is the national government, in the context of power and authority of governance, or in the context of power and governance decentralization, it signifies the devolution of power and authority of governance of central state and governments to sub-state national organizations. So one of the examples of it is the panchayats and municipal corporation in India. So decentralization also happens in the Philippines. So it also supports under the Section 2 of Local Government Code of the Philippines. So according to the Section 2 of Local Government Code, it is hereby declared that the policy of the state, that the territorial and political subdivisions of the state shall enjoy genuine and meaningful local autonomy to enable them to attain their fullest development as self-reliant communities and make them more effective partners in the attainment of national goals. Towards this end, the state shall provide for more responsive and accountable local government structure institute through a system of decentralization, whereby local government units shall be given more powers, authority, responsibilities, and resources. So that means the process of decentralization shall proceed from the national government to the local government units. Next slide, please. As we have mentioned, decentralization plays an important role when it comes to local governance. So let us define what is local governance. Local governance comprises a set of institutions, mechanisms, and processes through which citizens and their groups can articulate their interests and needs, mediate their differences, and exercise their rights and obligations at a local level. Next slide, please. Next is, as we have now understand what is decentralization, let us go to significance of decentralization. So let's talk about why decentralization is very important when it comes to local governance itself. Next slide, please. So it is important first because it creates an efficient and reliable administration. It intensifies and improves local development. Next, it enables maximum participation of the people concerned in decision-making processes on issues that concern them directly. Third, lower levels of government are encouraged and trained to be more self-reliant through decentralization. Lastly, it is important because decentralization decongest the central government of certain functions that could well be done at a lower levels. So that only means that participation and control of governance by the people of the country is the essence of democracy. So such participation is possible only when the powers of the states are decentralized to the districts, block, and village levels, where all the sectors of the people can sit together, enable for them to discuss their problems as well as monitor the implementation of programs. So It also means that decentralization is a prime mechanism through democracy becomes truly representative and responsive. So again, it supports under the law, or it is being supported under the law that we have mentioned earlier. However, one of the example of this, why decentralization is important, is according to the book of New Horizon of Public Administrations by Mohit Bhattacharya. He argues that the latest thinking on decentralization veers around power, equalization, and participation. So, what does it mean? That means that organization theory and political science, which did not meet often in the past, have now almost come together in explaining the concept of decentralization. So, next slide, please. Okay. So let's go to the approaches of decentralization. So again, when we say decentralization, it does not stop under the separation of power and authority within the national and the local government itself. There are different approaches of decentralization, which are the doctrinal approaches, political approach, administrative approach, and dual role approach. So let's define the doctrinal approach. Next slide, please. Approach is the strongest doctrinal case for decentralization. Is the one focus on local community, the city, town, or village. Um, Instead of treating decentralization as a means to achievement of some end value, such idealization tends it to the status of the hardened doctrine. So that means this approach seeks to treat decentralization as an end itself instead of treating it as a means to achieve organizational efficiency and effectiveness. So this approach lays stress on the empowerment of local community. Community involves the city, town, or village. So in India, based on the readings, or based on the book, which is my reference, the Panchayati Raj supposedly embodies an ancient tradition of local autonomy. So the essence of this approach is people empowerment by granting them decision making and functional authority. So, moreover, this approach, instead of again treating decentralization as a means to achievement as a means to the achievement of some end values, it consider it as an end. It is as an end in itself. So next slide, please. Let's go to the political approach. Political approach is the objective of decentralization. The objective of decentralization is certainly to transfer decision making on certain policy matters to subject national constituencies. It is being called by Fessler as an illusionary decentralization. So this approach believes that decentralization occurs in a political setting. So again, when we say political setting, these are the delegation of power from national to local. The will to create decentralization units and granting them a necessary authority for their autonomous functioning is politically decided. To create and maintain local government, that's a major political commitment. So, in the absence of such commitment, it will merely remain in law than actual practice. So, Fessler pointed out that illusionary decentralization, for example, again in India, as we have used the New Horizon of public administration. Um, in India, the evolution of power to local bodies have been granted formally, but these bodies are not given funds, functions, and functionaries essential to operate as an autonomous institution and are strongly controlled or influenced by respective state of governments. Okay, next slide, please. Third would be the administrative approach. The administrative approach to decentralization is based on the principle of efficiency and rationality. It is also a situation gradually presents a picture of polarization between general area-based administrative demands and specific. Um, this approach is based on principle of efficiency and effectiveness. So when field administrative units are set up through a process of decentralization, the measure is suitable for field level decision making and for redressal of grievances. So in this process, many administrative units might come up between the local administration and the central headquarters. So currently, um, when it comes to resolving such administrative problem, and to promote such operational principles, conscious attempts are needed to readjust from time to time conflicting claims of area and function in the concentrated field administration. So next slide, please. Lastly, is the dual role approach. It highlights the conflict in field administration between tradition and change. It is also demands cooperation and participation of people in administration and increased coordination among different administrative units. So this last approach seeks to highlight the conflict in field administration between tradition and change. The basic conflict, according to Fessler, is between the traditional function of maintenance of law and order and advancement of socioeconomic development. The main function of administration was again to maintain law and order and collection of revenue. However, the change concept of welfare state requires rapid socioeconomic development. So it demands cooperation and participation of people in administration and increased coordination among different administrative units. Thus, there is urgent need to change the system into decentralized, participative, and innovative one. The resolution of conflict between two different orientation in the field administration calls for adoptions of decentralization to changing circumstances. Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So now we understand the meaning of decentralization, the significance, and the different approaches. Let's go now with the pros of decentralization, pros and cons of decentralization. So when we say pros, these are the positive points of decentralization. One is, of course, efficient and cheaper service delivery will be the result of a mix of local demand and supply, since the local authorities know better the actual needs and the cost of production. Next, the planning and implementation of service are the best performed by those concerned with the delivery of the service. Third is decision making will be more participatory or democratic if elected officials and their electors are in close contact. Lastly, one of the good points of decentralization, it can provide an opportunity for the institutionalization of gender concerns at the local level and create spaces at the local level for women as a political actors. So again, one of the good points of decentralization is aside from the separation of national and local government unit itself, the local government has more jurisdictions when it comes to their budgets, their power, and their rules within their city or within their within their city. So that only means they can provide policies that they will know will help their constituents. Next slide, please. So aside from the good points or the pros of decentralization, there are also cons of decentralization. So first is the facilitate, or to facilitate, there are points that it can, or instances that it can facilitate misuse or corruption of local government as well as the central government, turning them into regimes of local dictatorship or elites. It also enhanced the inequalities between richer and poorer regions of a country. So that only means that since we have been separated from the jurisdiction of the national government, The local government has the full autonomy in terms of creating law that might or that could benefit their own interests, which will fall under misuse and abuse of power. So lastly, enhance the inequalities between richer and poorer regions of a country. So, in the Philippines, we are been divided into different regions, and we understand that there are regions that is not yet been or it's not yet fully established and not ready to establish their own government. So that's it. Next slide, please. So, all in all, decentralization is favored for access, citizen participation, and political responsiveness. So, therefore, decentralization depends on the situation and is not an absolute term. So, again, there are four approaches address different issues and challenges in the realization of decentralization. The doctrinal approach treats decentralization as an end in itself. The political approach highlights political character of decentralization, and the administrative approach is based on efficiency and effectiveness. And there you go. I hope we are able to understand the meaning, the concept of decentralization, its significance, and the different approaches. Thank you.